Hello and welcome to another episode of NICU Parent Network's Friday feature, where we get to highlight one of our amazing members. As you know, NICU Parent Network is the US-based professional organization of NICU parent leaders who collectively represent the needs and best interests of NICU families. And what is so very special about this network is that each of the members who are founders, executive directors, CEOs of NICU support organizations and advocacy organizations, all of them have that personal connection, that personal story that connects them so deeply to their cause and to their mission. We're all kind of going about the same thing. In fact, if you look at almost every mission or every website for these member organizations, you will find verbiage somewhere that says their purpose lies in making sure that NICU parents know that they are not alone. Because that is the exact, uh, you know, the birth point, the birthplace of these organizations, and the missions, uh, the commitment that these parents have was born out of that personal experience. And there really is nothing more special, I think, than being able to hear directly from the person that created the organization. You can read mission statements and purpose and services and programs on websites, but when you actually get to hear about that personal connection to the mission, it just makes it all the more special. So I'm really excited that today we have one of our very longtime members, Katie Reginato Cascamo, who is the founder of Courageous Steps. So, Katie, thank you so much for being with me today. And I'm excited to hear more about Courageous Steps. It certainly has grown over the past several years that you've been an NPN member.
Yes, it has.
So, I would love for you to start at the beginning. Just let us know about that personal connection you have to the NICU. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so my son is almost 13 years old now. He is in that throes of I'm a teenager. And we all know what that is like. It's the part attitude, but part gentleness and kindness and just that sense of him identifying his purpose in the world.
Right. Hmm.
We've had some really fun conversations lately about, well, what am I going to become and who am I going to become? And I tell him that it's not a static experience. It's not something that you figure out at 13
Right.
and and then you look back at age 65 and you've had this static experience.
Right.
So for me, my NICU journey started a few years before I actually had our son.
Okay.
I had been recruited by an international insurance broker that was really looking to change their organizational culture.
Hmm.
They had identified many district managers
Mhm.
who had been with the company 35 to even 45 years, and there were some concerns about their applicability to a changing world,
Mm,
particularly as it related to morals and ethics. There
mm,
were some recruitment issues. There was a lot of gaslighting,
mm,
a lot of these different things that were leading to some liability.
mm. Sure. It sounds like a pretty toxic culture that had been developed. Yeah.
Yeah, it had. What they were doing is going from having independent contracts with district managers to actually hiring them as employees.
Hmm.
And so in 2005, I had been recruited to be a district manager. I was high performing in recruitment and training and development. And I had one of my agents say to me, how can you lead? So, how can you lead agents if you've not been an agent yourself?
Hmm.
And that became my first understanding of what I now know is what's called servant leadership, is
Mhm,
leading from that space of experience.
mhm,
And so I ended up talking with the recruiter, with the regional vice president, saying, I really want to start an agency for 3 years. And at the end of these 3 years, I'm going to hand it over to a new agent. And then I'm going to go back towards this district manager experience. During those 3 years, because I was placed with one of those toxic district managers, my system broke down. It was the same burnout and cynicism and just cognitive stress that we hear in healthcare and education and in a lot of service-based organizations and in industries.
Right. Particularly now in the climate that we're in these days, we hear a lot of that.
Exactly. And so we ended up, my husband and I, John, ended up finding out that we were expecting our first child. And it was and so we had owned a home and we had this nice life in Southern Oregon at the time. I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, and it never dawned on me that there was a healthcare difference between urban and rural. I just didn't understand. I wasn't
right. If it's not your experience, you likely don't know.
Right. And so ended up going into my pregnancy very stressed out and just burned out and experiencing just physical difficulties. And so during the length of my pregnancy, I ended up fracturing my hand. We ended up having a flood in our house. I ended up deciding to close my agency and to pass it on to that new person in order to become a district manager. I ended up getting called for jury duty.
Oh my gosh.
The week after, I got swine flu at 6 months pregnant.
Oh no. Oh
yeah.
my
goodness. So this is a time when my mom was calling me every single day. Don't look at the news. It's on the news. Oh my God. Go hide. Just get around people.
Oh.
So I ended up getting swine flu and then recovering from that swine flu, and soon after having hand reconstructive surgery. The thought was, I'm going to be changing diapers, so I need to have access to my hand.
Sure.
And so I ended up going in for hand surgery on December 8th of 2009. And when I came out of that surgery, it revealed hidden preeclampsia.
Oh wow.
And so we didn't
know that you had preeclampsia at the time.
I did not know I had preeclampsia. I had it. We didn't have any. It had been hidden, essentially.
Interesting.
Well, that happened to be a day where there was just a massive blizzard outside. I mean, -1 degrees, blizzard, everything had just stopped. Wow. And so the highway that went over a 5,500-foot elevation mountain had been closed. The emergency helicopter was grounded. And I'm in this rural hospital with people that just didn't have the resources or the tools to take care of me.
Right.
And so my obstetrician came and checked in with me, and they were going to wait to the following day. And I said, well, I have the airlift insurance. Does that change? And that kind of goes into that whole preparation and planning.
Right.
Well, they ended up transporting me by ambulance to a fixed wing plane over the 5,500-foot mountain and then to another airport, and then transporting me again.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, and so it was during that air flight that I realized, I had that reflective moment, that powerful defining moment where I said, I cannot continue to live my life in the same way that I cannot lead in the same way that I had been, where I had been in full control, not asking others for help. I had been.
Right. And remind me, how far along in your pregnancy were you at this point?
29 weeks, 6 days. So it's just under that 30-week mark. So being airlifted over that night. And as they were transporting me into the hospital, I'd had this profound self-reflective moment. I had an opportunity to see how the emergency personnel worked around me. And I said, wow, this is interesting. everyone knows their place. It
Mhm.
almost feels like this dance.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
almost like the Nutcracker. Every, everyone knew what they needed to do to make this happen. And I
Right.
was curious. And I thought that was the first seed that was planted
Mhm.
as it related to organizational leadership.
Yeah. Interesting. So, your son was born
He
at
was
that same day?
I was in the birthing ICU for 4 days,
Mhm.
and then he was born at 30 weeks, 3 days,
Okay.
at 2 pounds 8 ounces by
Mm,
emergency C-section
mm,
because his heartbeat had become undetected.
mhm.
Well, he came out screaming, and I can tell you, he's been screaming for 13
Ever
years.
since.
Man,
Right,
that kid is all life.
right.
And we spent 56 days in the NICU.
Mhm,
And it was in the NICU that from the time I was transported into the hospital and throughout the NICU,
mhm,
where I began to really heal.
mhm,
So in some ways, later on in life, I was diagnosed with PTSD,
mhm,
but it was a result of having lost my identity as my career
mm,
and being airlifted in critical condition.
mhm,
The
mhm,
NICU became a place of safety, of care, of
mhm,
healing.
mhm,
And I wanted to know more about, what is that?
mhm.
Because I come from this, management leadership kind of background. What
Right.
are they doing to empower and equip people to go out and serve?
Mhm, mhm. And so talk to me a little bit about that then. You're in the NICU. Um, how how were you empowered and equipped as a parent to a preterm baby?
In a lot of ways, our nurses would do a lot of hand over hand care for me. So I
Mm,
had my hand
right.
in a cast larger than my 2 pound 8 ounce son.
Right, right.
So, I was terrified to change his diaper. I
Oh,
was
I can imagine.
terrified to do, I mean, all it took was one little flip of my
Right.
hand, and that would not have turned out well. And
Mhm.
so I was terrified to go through that process.
Sure.
And one of the things our nurses did is taught me through that voice of fear.
Mm. Hmm. Mhm.
That voice of fear became empowerment
Hmm.
instead of that voice of fear being something that I was allowed to shrink or hide. It was that encouragement, and it was that voice of fear plus of overcoming that voice of fear,
Mhm.
plus just that being able to change his diaper one handed and do
Right.
cares one handed.
Mhm.
So, beyond just teaching me how to do it, they taught me how to teach others.
Hmm. Wow.
So that whenever I learned how to do something, I was able to then teach my husband, who came mostly every weekend, and then
Mhm.
my parents, who also came every day.
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
a level of knowledge of how do we go about teaching this
Mhm.
information.
Mhm. So it really is, kind of that almost like a coaching model
It
in
is.
terms of, the way that the nurses were able to coach you, um, because that's the whole point of a coach, right? Even, for a
Mhm.
sports team, it's you are empowering your athletes, your team to do it themselves because you can't go out and do it for them. And that's what it
Right.
sounds like these nurses did for you. They weren't going home with you with Geo,
Mhm.
right? But they were coaching you and empowering you to be able to be his mother at home.
Mhm.
So, so it sounds like you had a very astonishingly self-aware moment during your critical condition. I can't say the same of myself during my delivery and the days leading up to it. So it's pretty exceptional experience that you had. When was the moment that you said, "Okay, I'm gonna go out and do something now that's related to, NICU families?" Um, was that while you were in the NICU? Was it when you came home? Was it like a light bulb moment, or was it just kind of one of those nagging things that wouldn't go away?
About 3 weeks into our NICU stay, so I had been a business leader in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reaching out or somehow communicating with our local newspaper and briefly telling our story. And they ended up sending a reporter to the NICU and doing a front page piece
Oh my gosh.
of our story, of our NICU story. And it was published on January 3rd of 2010, front page of the newspaper. And I was talking about this profound experience of awareness. I didn't know what a NICU was. I had to learn how to say NICU. I mean, I really had no idea. And when I thought about the March of Dimes, it just didn't dawn on me. It wasn't in my level of awareness. And so when that got published, I started getting emails and friends talking about it and saying, "Oh my gosh, this leader, this person who is influential in our community just had this experience." Well, we got 30 blankets delivered to us at the NICU.
Oh wow.
And I mean, we just notes of encouragement and empowerment, and thank you so much for telling your story. And in that article, and I have copies of that article, it talked about that moment of being rolled into the hospital, and I used that metaphor of the Nutcracker ballet. And that theme became what led me to later, over a couple of years, pursue my master's degree in organizational leadership, because I wanted to know, how do NICU parent leaders help improve the way healthcare is delivered? And that is what's led me to now my master's degree, and I'm in the process of finishing my PhD.
So tell me about Courageous Steps. What does Courageous Steps do? How does it impact families?
My focus is less family to patient to family. It's less of that peer support. I'm more interested in being behind the scenes in management, human resources, and leadership, and improving the way healthcare providers improve their well-being. So I do a lot of research in issues of burnout and moral injury, and do a lot of lecturing and more seminars and workshops, coaching, so one-to-one coaching, meeting with executive leaders, and helping, how do we take our NICU experience and construct it throughout the world, so that every NICU family can experience that profound care that I received, that we received.
Right.
And so in a lot of ways, so often you don't have to go very far in reading about healthcare, where we talk about burnout and moral injury and all the negativity.
Yeah.
Well, we can remove the burnout, but what are we replacing it with? And so when I do my seminars and my workshops and my focus on building parent leaders, it's more of an interest in, okay, so what are we doing with that? So we're focusing on well-being. We're focusing on building a vision, and how do we integrate and implement it throughout the organization? It's about that voice of fear, voice of cynicism, and voice of judgment. How do we recruit and retain our clinical providers? And what are those systems in place that create well-being, rather than focusing on the negatives? How do we have units and teams that are thriving? So team building, a lot of servant leadership, compassionate leadership, empathy, healing, awareness.
Mhm.
How do we build community
Mhm.
within that? So I have about 36 hours of curriculum that I've built,
Mhm.
and I break them into anywhere between 1 and 3 hour segments.
Mhm. And is that all, in-person type training and seminars, or is it, are they modules that you have on your website? How is the training delivered?
It's often I can either do it by Zoom, live Zoom,
Mhm.
or in person.
Okay.
I found that I can do the same quality work on Zoom
Mhm.
as I can in person. So I've built a process, a system
Mhm.
by which the the people that participate can experience that same richness
Mhm.
and that same connection and that same depth
Mm.
through Zoom.
Yeah.
So that whole Zoom burnout, or what's it called,
Zoomed out.
that zoomed out. There we go. That doesn't exist in the work that I do.
Mm.
And so the reason I like to do Zoom whenever possible is because I can go global.
Mhm.
So
Sure.
I'm sitting here on my 40-acre ranch
Mhm.
with my cows outside, and I can do it all from home, right?
Yeah, right. That's great. So, we're just about out of time. So, let me just wrap up with two final questions for you. The first is a fill in the blank. NICU and bereaved families are.
Love.
Hmm.
So incredibly loved.
Mhm.
And so when I think of what love is, if we disconnect our actions, which would be that compassion, the compassion is an action, but
Mm.
the empathy requires that lived experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
It requires having been through the NICU
Mm.
and having a real deep, constantly renewing source of strength.
Mm. Mhm.
And it's from that depth, that pour over, that we love our
Yeah.
NICU parents.
So, if you were sitting with a NICU or a bereaved family right now, what's one thing that you wish that they knew that they might not know yet? Maybe something that you learned upon reflection on your experience.
The NICU is a defining moment in life.
Mhm.
I described on the night I was airlifted that I had that profound moment of my life needs to change. I didn't know what was gonna happen or what it was gonna look like,
Mhm.
but I knew that that was that defining moment.
Mhm.
Be in a place of just being.
Mhm.
Allow yourself to just exist. Don't try and plan out the rest of your life. Just
Yeah.
let things evolve.
Mhm. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, that is an absolutely beautiful way for us to end our chat. I do want to make sure, is there anything else that you wanted to share or say that maybe I didn't ask, or anything you have on the horizon that you want to celebrate?
I have just started my dissertation. So my PhD dissertation, and in 2012, when I started this journey, I asked a question, and it was, how do we, NICU parent leaders, co-create or help improve the way healthcare is delivered to neonatal families?
Hmm.
Fast forward a decade later,
Yeah.
and that's the question I'm asking, or
Hmm.
the leading question I'm asking as part of my dissertation.
Yeah.
And I would, if there's someone that wants to offer their insight or advice or be part of this dialogue,
Hmm.
they can reach me at courageoussteps.org.
I'm going to put that in the chat. Just 1 minute. Courageous Steps.org. Okay. Fantastic. Well, Katie, thank you so much. It's always wonderful to see you and have a chance to visit with you. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It really, no single person can do it all. And it's wonderful that we've got someone like you leading this, kind of research and work that really will continue to validate and lend credibility to what all of us are trying to do in the world for NICU families. So thank you for being the leader that you are. And we will be back next Friday, which is the first Friday of November. So that means it will be our Friday feature, Let's Talk About Race, with myself and Gigi Kanyangwa Fernandez, our board president. So we will see you next week. Have a great weekend.